And did you do the second step?
We're all set.
Excellent. Great.
And with that, I think we're about to begin. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dennis Boyer, the Nonprofit Net Board President, and I want to welcome each and every one of you to our Zoominar today. The year end is the season when many people make their charitable donations. So I'd like to remind you that the only way we can keep our seminars and Zoominars open to everyone without charge is with your financial support. We have expenses to bring each session to you. So we hope you'll consider supporting us with a suggested donation of say $10 to $20 or even more. It does happen. And I'm going to be sending you a link to our donation page through the Zoom chat. Almost as important as that is your feedback, because it helps us plan our future programs and it's important to our speakers too. So along with the links I just mentioned, I'll be sending you a survey form link. So please do let us know what you think. How do you get institutional funders to pay attention to your proposal? Well, today's presentation is designed as a workshop to give you first-hand experience in making your best case to funders.
I think that was kind of
and who better to lead it than Mary Barrera, a foundation funding expert with decades of experience, and someone needs to meet their...
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Maybe you could ask everyone to mute.
That's too bad. And they were, I'm surprised given the sort of the weak position of the board that they were not just asked to stay on.
I'm just not
sure. Are you able to mute everybody? Can you just mute them all?
Oh, okay.
Probably.
Yep.
I just muted them.
There we go. Okay, thanks. Well, with that, we've already had our first words of wisdom from Mary Barrera. And Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Terrific. Thank you. And hi, everyone. I'm going to be a little disjointed, perhaps only because I can't see you all as I look at the slides that I'm sharing. So I hope you'll raise your hand or flag Dennis if you want to ask a question. And I don't have a lot of slides. I'm not a slide heavy type of person. So I'd love to just kind of talk through these and then have a conversation afterwards if that works for everybody. And I will start by saying I have a little bit of trepidation today because I am not sure I'm going to share anything new with any of you. I think most, or if not all of you, know what I'm about to share. But I am sharing this as a result of having thought a lot about how nonprofits can best put their cases forward, particularly because of the intensity of COVID this last year. And also because I've read, I'm going to say, literally hundreds of proposals this year for half a dozen different funding clients. And so I've seen a lot in different program areas, different types of proposals, different queries and questions that obviously each funder has that's particular to what they're interested in. So I hope some of that is useful to you. And I hope it's not a waste of anybody's time. So I'll tell you what I have as goals for this meeting. As I've said, I want to share what I've learned in my work with family foundations. I want to give you something that encourages your efforts to tell your organization's story in a way that really resonates, and resonating not only with the trustees and the funders, but also the staff who serve them, because that often you have a gateway to go through to get to the actual decision makers. And then finally, I'd like to hear from you. What would make this whole process easier? What could funders do that would be useful and valuable to you as you pursue funding for your very vital missions? I can't promise I can make any of them happen, but as I advise philanthropists and family foundations, I'm certainly happy to share what I've learned from all of you about what kinds of proposal questions or reporting questions or processes really do make it easier for you to share the great work that you do. So I'll just tell you a second about me. I started my career as a community organizer and a political campaign organizer. I moved into grant writing for one of the community organizing organizations that I worked for in Texas, and then became a development director and communications director in Texas and Massachusetts for different nonprofits. I moved to the foundation space in 2000 and have worked as a staff leader and a volunteer with some, and a consultant for family foundations. I'm on the board of a local health conversion foundation. So I have a lot of experience with different kinds of funders, and I'm hoping some of what I share is useful to you from that. So you all know about this. This is the challenge you're facing. You may not know about the urgency, or not think about the urgency or the challenge that funders feel. Many of them are generators of the wealth. They've worked hard for it. They've invented something. They've built a huge business. They have in some way created the wealth, and they want to do something important with it as they're either winding down a career or selling their business, and they want to do that well. And if they made a widget or had a patent that generated the wealth, that means they know nothing about what organizations do to address homelessness. And they know nothing about what organizations do to address domestic violence or provide arts to underserved youth. And so they want to use their money well, but don't always know how best to do that. Other funders are descendants of those donors, the ones who created the wealth, second, third, fourth generation family members. And they may feel a particular urgency to do this really well in honor of the ancestor who created the foundation wealth that they're now charged with giving away. And so I didn't think about that much, but I was on the fundraising side of things. I think about that a lot now, because I think that funders really do look at the number of proposals in front of them and have a lot of different criteria and worries and hopes and aspirations running through their minds as they review them. So I think part of what we tried to do, and Dennis and I talking about setting this up, was really thinking about, you're all writing proposals, you're all submitting proposals. How do you best get your message across? How do you compete? And I'm sorry, it is a competition, right? You are competing with dozens of other nonprofits sometimes who are also seeking funding from a particular funder. And I think there are three key things. One is knowing your audience, not just the funders and their backgrounds and what they do, but maybe the staff. Who are the program people? What's their background? How much do they know about what you are working on? How can you, if they don't know anything, how do you get to best educate them and help them understand not only what you work on, but your vital role in this issue area? The second is the context, which is a bit related to that. The context that you're in, the ecosystem that your organization sits in. So if you're working on, say, arts for youth, there's probably a couple dozen organizations in the greater Boston area or in the greater Worcester area or wherever your area is who do something related to this. And it's really incumbent on you to understand what others are doing and understand both how you all work together well, but what also makes you stand out and stand apart. And the third is maybe the most important and the hardest, which is to distill what your expertise is, what your experience is, what your particular approach is, what makes you unique is, distilling that into, I don't know, 10 boxes that have 250 word limits each. I mean, it's hard. It's really, really hard. So that is what I think is actually key to getting a foot in the door and then keeping the foot in the door as you pursue renewed funding, if you get funding in the first place. So here's a couple of things that I think really help. Succinctness, that's part of that distillation. So you know everything there is to know about early learning and reading before grade 3 and early childhood brain development, everything. You're the expert. You cannot give us that. The funders can't take it in. They can't make sense of it. They have to take, it's like sound bites and bullets on PowerPoints. It's what are the key things? And that means leaving a ton of stuff out, but you have to trust, I think, that is going to be an okay thing to do. That and then there's a little section in most proposals that I'll talk about in a minute where you can add some more. The second is, we just talked about explaining the context that you work in and what's the ecosystem, how many other organizations do what you do, how many other groups are trying to fight the same fight or solve the same problem. And not only how you see them as collaborators and partners, but how you stand out above them. Showcasing how you collaborate is actually really important. There's not enough philanthropic money to fund adequately every homeless shelter in Greater Boston. There just isn't. But if 2 or 3 shelters work together so that their programs are collaborative and not competitive or not overlapping or not duplicative, and you can say that to the funder, then I think you have a really strong case to make. And in that, you can say these 3 organizations, we all work really well together. This is our added value. This is the piece that we bring that we think is really worthy of funding. You're not dismissing anybody else's work, you're just uplifting your own. And my last is short. It's so much better than long. I recently read a 17-page narrative that was just everything thrown in. It was everything but the kitchen sink, because they just were desperate to make sure we understood everything they did. And it was really, really hard to get through and really hard to distill to something that the funder could look at and really act on. So, and I don't know if they got funding or not, so I can't speak to that. So then there's some things that, as I was thinking about what I'd love to share, what I'd like to see as I review hundreds of proposals every year, and particularly sort of the last quarter of the year. A proposal that is generic, that's based on the common app, common application that Philanthropy Massachusetts has and maybe other groups have, is really great. Fill it out, but then tweak it so that if I'm representing a donor who has 4 generations of family members and perhaps one generation is slightly more conservative than another and they all vote together, you may or may not know this, but you've got to make some guesses. You've got to tailor your message about what you do that's going to speak to both of them. Look at the board lists and figure out the best you can, it's imperfect, what each person might care about or what each person may really value and want to hear more about. And this is hard. I'm not dismissing or making this, I hope I don't make this sound like it's easy. It's very hard to know when you have not met these people and you get only a little bit of information from a website. The second thing I'd say is giving examples of how you've leveraged the grant funds you've received. It can be very explicit. We used your $50,000 gift to raise $100,000 from new donors. We made it into a match or a challenge grant. It can be very non-specific to say your funding helped us complete our budget, which allowed us to do the work we need to do and increase our services and grow our budget. Therefore, I mean, it's a little bit more diffused. Still helps the donor understand their funding truly made a difference. I think we're all talking about this now is how do our boards and our staffs represent communities that we serve? Family foundations are a bit disadvantaged in this, and many of them know it. But they do want to see, to the extent many of them want to see, that they are giving to groups that represent the issues. So for instance, giving to a school that assists visually impaired people, having visually impaired people on the board, giving to an organization that helps with arts programs for youth in cities where there may not be many many programs, having graduates of those programs or people who've been through those programs or parents of the kids on the board, as well as donors and business people, etc. And then finally, I think showing the impact of the funding you've received, really linking it to outcomes and accomplishments. And I think this is important, particularly when you get a general operating support grant, because you get that, and that is the holy grail, right? That's money you can use for anything you need. The funder says, we trust you to do your work the way you know how. If you need to pay a light bill with this or pay staff benefits with this, we trust that's going to help get the programs running and serve the clients you serve. But they still want to hear that by their grant, you were able to serve those people, even if what the grant money did was pay the staff benefits or pay the rent. So I think linking always back to the work of the organization and how it was able to be accomplished because of the support that you got is absolutely critical. And I think it's a little easier for people to remember that when it's a program specific grant, but I'm trying to encourage funders to do general operating support. They still need to see and hear that their grant funding actually did something very tangible. And so then, let me see, where's my arrow? There we go. And a couple more things that I think are really important and helpful. Sharing short anecdotes, a story, picture tells 1,000 words or something like that, right? A story gives you the opportunity to share an example of what you did. So the young person who comes into the arts program, who's failing out and always in detention and always struggling and has all the things stacked up against them, creating some art that gets shown at a local town hall or library or school system, and their pride in that that's a real story, and a donor can think about that young person and realize that their funding helps make that happen. It's not scientific, right? It's an anecdote, but it actually, I think, is really sometimes more helpful than data, than hard facts and figures. I did a series of, I asked for some reports for a funder this past early fall, and 5 short questions. I'm trying to be that good grant maker that where we ask the short questions and make it easy for people to fill this out. And the last one was, is there anything else you want us to know? And I didn't have any word counts. This was just write what you wanted to write. That is the opportunity. What I didn't ask, what the funder didn't think about, what you really want to brag about, but you didn't see or couldn't fit into some of the other questions, that's the place. And I'd say 25% of the people who returned, 20% of the people who returned the reports to us for this one funder left it blank. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's a golden opportunity. I'm giving you carte blanche, throw it in. I may not be able to summarize all of it or share all of it, but at least I'll have a better sense of a better rounded, nuanced sense of what you do and why. And then I can slip that into the 1-page summary that I did for all of these reports. So I got 5, 10, 15-page reports. They got to be 1 page. I got to distill it down. And so to the extent that you can make that easier for me to do, I get to showcase your work better. I get to promote your work more accurately and lift it up in a better way. Because the information is there. So I think that really covers the next as well. The next is also lessons that you've learned the hard way, like we used to call them failures. Now we all say lessons learned or mistakes or whatever. But talking about how the work evolved as a result. I just read a report from an organization. They had a very ambitious construction timeline for a project that was funded in a major way, millions of dollars way by this funder. And it had been stalled, and COVID was part of it, but local politics and some land permit issue things were also part of it. And they wrote a report this year that said, yeah, this is what happened. And here's how we moved the bureaucratic log jams out of the way. And in so doing, we got to know our local legislators at the local level, town or city level, and then state level. And we're going to make sure we keep those relationships up so that as we build and grow, they become our allies. That was the best example I've read in a long time of making lemonade out of lemons. And I thought it was great. And I love to see that. And I hope most funders don't really hold things that come up in issues against organizations. Certainly if we've learned nothing from COVID, we shouldn't be. We should be allowing for the fact that things don't always go as planned. The last thing I'll say, and this is occurring to me as I'm receiving a ton of newsletter appeals from all these grant recipient organizations. I think it's better not to add your funders to your general marketing mailing list. I think it's much better to all the content you put into a marketing email, all the bullets and the highlights of what you do can be put into a short summary report and sent just to funders. And I would include prospective funders. I would include past funders who have no longer funded you for whatever reason, and current funders. And I would send them out, I don't know, quarterly, maybe bi-monthly if you have a lot to say. I just think it keeps you on their radar screen in a way that feels more tailored than just the mass marketing emails. So then a couple of don'ts that occurred to me and this is all real stuff that I've read. So I read one report saying how we asked how funds were going to be used, and they answered the questions I know they wish they'd been asked. They didn't answer anything that was on the reporting form. And we know they do good work, but they just looked at it clearly and said, yeah, we want to talk about something else. And that wasn't all that helpful in drafting the summaries for the donors. The other is throwing all of the information in, everything you've got. So you hope that something sticks or something stands out. And that 17-page proposal I mentioned earlier, they did that. And I had to read that thing through 3 times to really pull out the 1 page worth of information. Someone who doesn't have that time is going to put that into a no. That's just going to go into a no pile. And you want to avoid that, obviously. Don't assume that readers know anything about the issue. A program officer may come out of, maybe someone who's worked in a homeless shelter and is now doing that kind of work for a foundation. That's great. But the donors on the board of a community foundation or family foundation or independent funder may not know a thing about the problem area. So you've got to have that succinct statement that this is the problem. Here's what we believe is the approach, and then let us tell you how we're addressing it. And then the jargon, the acronyms, I think we're all guilty of this in our field, but every field, every issue area has a different set. There's a lot of word salad that I read, and that was hard to work through. And again, if somebody is really pressed for time and has been told they have the right or ability to put some aside that shouldn't go forward, you risk being in that pile if you're giving a lot of word salad. So then these other things, I got this from this first one from several report people this year, report organizations, providing links to videos and stories and saying, here you go, please look. I reviewed 800 grant proposals this year. And in addition to doing other work for funders, right? Research and program area development, I cannot go watch through a 5 or 10 or however many minute video and take the learnings. I cannot go to your website and look at the stories and distract the learnings. If you want to send those, please do, but send them along right after the paragraph that distills what you want me to see. If you want me to take away a certain set of stories or examples from a video, call those out in some bullets and then send the link, because maybe I do want to look at that, but I can't just use that. Then I think a lot of other folks discuss outputs, the work that's happened, as if they were outcomes. And I think a lot of us, because of logic model work, et cetera, know the difference, but be careful about that. The outputs are really important. The work you've done with the money you've raised is just essential. What it leads to, even if you're not there yet, you haven't solved the problem yet, it is leading down the road to success. And I think that's what you can talk about. And then I just wrote this and I questioned whether to leave it in, but I got a couple of reports from grant recipients this year where they talked about their work doing, they talked about their work to, their work was going to fix the patriarchy. Their work was going to dismantle racism. And I think those are wildly appropriate goals. I think those are amazing things to work on. There is no way that a $3.2 million institution is going to fix racism. It's not. And so I think just being careful to say, maybe that's the vision that you're going to go for, but the work is going to be to take a smaller piece of that, to bite that off and to try to make that happen, whatever that smaller piece is. And I think you get to define that. I think that's actually something that I hope you feel you have a sense of the ability to do, is define what you feel is the most important outcome and the most important step forward. And how you think about your work and how you understand the issue that you're approaching, you're the experts. We're not. So let me see if I can. I think I've got one more. Yeah. So this is just the summary. Helping people understand how you've leveraged the money, not just for other money, but how you've leveraged into partnerships or how you've leveraged into different program areas or expansion. The impact as you define it, because who's going to say it's wrong, right? You're defining your impact, and that's what you can help us understand. The collaboration, the challenges and the benefits. We know there's challenges in collaborating. We also know there's great benefits. And I think you can be frank about both of those. And it may be that you say there's a reason you're not collaborating in a certain program area or with a certain set of actors. That's okay. You just explain maybe why. And then I think understanding, we talked about this a minute ago, what you've learned, maybe the hard way, and how that's improved what you do or helped you improve what you do. So those are the key. And again, I don't know if I told you anything new at all, but I really would love to hear if this is helpful. If there's things that were confusing that I went too quickly by, I do speak fast. And are there some ideas people have about how funders can make this easier for you? And I wonder, I think it may be better if we stop sharing the screen and we just can have a conversation. That's all right. Let's see.
Yeah.
So
mouse
I am not sure I'm going to see people who are,
484.
but there's somebody speaking, so we're not sure who that is.
Sorry, I'm just talking to my computer.
Okay, welcome.
84. Click.
Can I put you on mute? Will you do that and then unmute? Okay. So I whizzed through some things really quickly. I tend to do that. I apologize. Is there anything that was of interest in particular? I see, Tom, you've got your hand up. Why don't you go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, hi, thank you. So I It's been my impression that sending an application into a foundation without first sort of getting to meet with people at the foundation, just maybe submitting something through the foundation's website is basically a waste of time, sort of like sending your resume into to a large corporation, to their human resources department. That's pretty much also, and that's what everybody does, but it's a waste of time. And I'm wondering, do you agree with that sort of submitting submitting proposals through a foundation's website without any sort of discussions with someone, that's pretty much not worth the effort?
I don't agree with that, but I have a tweak I'd give to it. So the reason I don't agree with it is I worked for a foundation, family foundation, with a number of trustees, a couple of different generations, and they had very different ideas of what they wanted to fund, what mattered to them, what approaches they thought were best for social challenges or social issues. And so there are, I don't know, 10 trustees or 10 different ways to look at something. And they had on their website, they still have on their website, does not accept unsolicited proposals, right? But when I was their executive director, they would say to me, if you get something in the mail, snail mail or email, why don't you summarize it and send it out to us at the end of the week in a kind of a report. And if we're interested, we'll ask for more information. And I saw grants come about at least a half dozen times to organizations that were nowhere on their radar, that were the unsolicited approaches, right? And what people did was they put together a letter and then a one-pager type of a fact sheet. Doesn't always work. So here's the caveat I would say. I think it's worth to do. And I'm sorry for my fellow staff, foundation staff folks who don't like that. I think it's worth to do it. And I think what you do is you do a letter and a fact sheet, no more, one-page letter. Here's why I think we're a good fit. Here's the big things we're working on. If you're interested in learning more, we'd love to talk to you or send you something. And maybe it's a brochure kind of thing or a fact sheet. And then don't get annoyed if you don't hear back. They said they don't accept. But even the well-staffed, even the large, big foundations in our state or our region don't have enough staff who have enough depth of knowledge to know everything that's happening in a given field. So if you have something you're doing that actually speaks to them and they go, oh my gosh, we didn't know about this, we want to learn more. It could, and I don't think it costs you what? You've got a template, you personalize it, you email it, and you maybe you add that email address you use to your summary piece, the one I talked about, that isn't your marketing, it isn't flooding them with emails, right? Don't flood them with Giving Tuesday emails. Don't add them to the Giving Tuesday list. But you do get a chance to, it's that little foot in the door, and you don't know when it's going to bear fruit, but I don't think it's a big lift to do.
Right, but you wouldn't submit a fully formed 10-page proposal that you spent a ton of time on.
Right, exactly.
Because you wouldn't recommend investing in that much time.
I wouldn't. And I will tell you, when people did that and they did this big, lots of pages, lots of whatever, I would look at that and go, you all, whoever it was, spent a lot of time on this. I'm not sure that was efficient. What does that make me wonder about the rest of the work? And that's not maybe fair, especially if it's a common proposal. If you have a generic, the Philanthropy Massachusetts form, the common proposal, and you fill that out that you're going to adapt for funders, you could send it to them with a note that says, this is our standard, right? I mean, I didn't do anything new for you. This is our standard. And I hope it helps you get a sense. But the downfall of that is that is a 6 or 7 or 8 page proposal form, right? With the different boxes and different. If you're trying to make an introduction to somebody, you need the email or print version of an elevator pitch, and that's not that proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Avina, is it Vina? Oh, hang on, let's unmute you. Can you unmute? Oh, it's not working. Why is it not working? I don't think I have the power to actually unmute. I can only, oh, there you go.
To do it, yeah, okay. So to continue the thought that we were just talking about, so if you fill out a 6-7 page proposal form, but have a letter which summarizes what your organization does, instead of sending like a whole big 10-page or 15-page, description of your organization, would that help? And then hopefully you hear back. And if you hear back, then you send out a detailed proposal.
Exactly, exactly. So the ease of sending, so what I'm looking at this, and if I'm getting an unknown person emailing me saying, I hope you'd look at this. And if it's very short, then I'm thinking, okay, that's an appropriate level of effort they put in for something they don't know what's going to happen. If the funder I'm working for says, that's really interesting, could you learn more? And I say, I'd love to learn more, and you can send me something in a week that has more, that's great. But I would not be shy about sending out really the one page or the email with a few bullets. It's a bit of a fishing expedition, but it's how else is a funder going to know you're there?
Yeah. So would you also include in that, if you have any collaboration with some other organization, would that help in a one-page letter, or should you just hold off on that until you're sending a detailed proposal?
I think it depends on what you are seeking funding for. And if it's a huge, difficult issue, like it's global warming, it's something really, really big that no one organization tackles well on their own, then to say, we're doing this in collaboration with a number of local partners. If this is of interest to you, I'd love to tell you more. And maybe that's how you reference that you're doing collaborative work, as opposed to taking up precious space on the email screen or the page that you send with the names. You're not there that part of the relationship yet with the funder.
Yeah, thank you. I'll come back later with one more question, but I give chance to other people to ask first.
Thank you, thank you. Are there others? Oh, there's chat, which I'm terrible at checking this. Oh, I see. No, this is.
I'm curious. My local university has like a grants library, and I've been told about grants.gov, but are there resources you'd recommend for finding foundation grants that are more targeted?
So there's what I know, and so I'm a decade or more away from, well, that's not true. I did some research on new grants about 5 years ago. So, okay, maybe. What I would recommend is accessing online is it the Foundation Center, folks? Is that the one that has you can search, I think you can do keyword searches. So you'll pull up, for example, animal rights funders or human rights or funders or whatever the issue is. And then you start to parse through those lists. Who funds in your area? Who is not, who's a local funder to you? Who's somebody who is going to be funding outside of your area? Yeah, so if that helps, I think that's the one. Does anybody else have a better solution or suggestion for Anna?
What's the web address for that? The Foundation Center?
So I think it's fdncenter.org, but someone else is going to know that better than me. Anybody?
Sick.
Oh, I don't know. So, if maybe Dennis, you have some resources you can share out that speak to that. If I can find a web address for that when we get off the call, I'm happy to try to forward that. But I think it's Foundation Center or fdncenter.org. Candid, which used to be, well, that is actually Foundation Center and GuideStar, right? So Candid may also have that database. And if you are a member of Philanthropy Massachusetts, I believe you get access to that online. I hope I'm right about that.
Can I access that if I'm in Wisconsin?
Yeah, it's online, right? So yeah. Or maybe Wisconsin has a nonprofit center that has access to that.
Okay.
So I'm seeing Shelby is asking, can you talk more about how to go about making these connections with funders in a virtual environment? That's really hard. You're in Texas working with a nonprofit in Mass, and it's challenging to make connections. Yeah, so it is really challenging to make connections. I think actually for you in Texas, Zoom makes it easier. I'm not sure who I'm looking at, which box I'm looking at, sorry. I think Zoom, Dennis and I were just talking about this before we started, is I can attend webinars in Colorado, in Washington State, in wherever, to do the learning that I would have had to get on a plane to do at a conference, years ago. So that makes it easier. Getting people's attention when we're all fairly zoomed out, that's hard. So I think I'm going to go back to the idea of, if you've got what you feel is a match, you look at what this funder funds and you're thinking, we are so good, we do all of this, we do it better than anybody else on the list. We really ought to be funded, or at least be noticed by this funder. I would send in that 1-page description and ask for a conversation. And then I would maybe, every 3 months, ping them with an update, even if they've never responded. Thought you'd be interested to know this is the direction our work is taking. Thought you'd be interested to learn these are the 3 things we did last quarter that were hugely successful on an issue they care about. So that's, I don't think I have any better advice than that. But if others do, again, please take yourself off mute and jump in.
Mary, I just wanted to point out that Howard submitted into the chat the URL for the Foundation Center online. So
Perfect.
if you know how to access the chat, there it is.
Great. And Dawn points out that some libraries, public libraries, and you're right, college, university libraries offer free access to the Foundation database and other resources. So you might check there. Yeah,
excuse me. And thank you, Howard.
Yeah, thank you very much, Howard. Absolutely. And Andrea put it in too. Thanks, Andrea. Jen asked if we could dive into summary emails versus newsletter blasts. So I'm reacting to what I received in my inbox on Giving Tuesday. A ton. And everybody wants to make the best use of Giving Tuesday. But the way that foundations work is they don't respond, most, not all, to respond to that one day. They are more deliberate in looking at proposals and reports and spending a month researching and meeting and talking about what they're going to fund. So it wasn't that useful, and I spent a lot of time on Giving Tuesday deleting. And if you had something really wonderful and important and vital to share about your work, I missed it, and I don't get to share it with the funder. If you send me something that says we're sending some of our supporters or people who we know are interested in what we do in this issue area, even if they don't yet donate, sending you a short highlight. We hope this is useful. It can be a subset of what you send out to your 3,000 plus person, or however many you've got on your email list. I think it just has a different feeling for the donor, the larger donor, right? The $5, $10, $15, $20,000 giver, than just getting the monthly updates that get auto-generated. I tend to find those not very useful, even for organizations. I, as a small dollar figure donor, my husband and I support in our own philanthropy. I don't, once a month, I think, send me something when something's happened, or send me something to remind me that this still is in progress. I think that's more useful. That's just my own communication strategy. But that's why I suggest that. And Meg?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to that, Mari. Thanks. You mentioned sending those monthly updates to past funders or people who maybe you have applied to and haven't received funding from. And I'm wondering if you had any thoughts. Would you send kind of just the same message, or would you reframe that for them in some way if there's someone you've approached maybe successfully at one point and unsuccessfully following that? Would you change the message at all?
So I think that's a great question. And I think that the answer would be, it depends on the bandwidth and the capacity within your organization. If you've got staff or volunteers who can craft variations of a message for you to send to different funders, current, prospective, past, that's great. Most organizations don't tend to have, or I won't say that. Many organizations may not have that. And so then having a generic, or a template for
Right.
what you want to share,
Yeah.
filling that with new information, and then just getting that out to people, having them all in the BCC line. You're not doing individualized anything. You
Oh,
might do it, right? So I that's what I'm just like, here's an update we thought you'd like. For the Smith Foundation or the Jones Foundation or the Shapiro or the Lopez or the whomever foundation who actually funds you, you might say, Mr. and Mrs. Lopez, we sent this out to other, to donors. I really thought you'd appreciate knowing this piece because it's something I know that matters to you.
cool.
So I would take some time to personalize that first line of it for your top 5, your top however many donors. But I think for everybody else, it's a quick and dirty. We thought you'd be interested, and let them unsubscribe if they want to unsubscribe. I keep those lists, by the way, because once in a while, and I unsubscribe all the time to stuff, and then a year later somebody will throw me something again, and they're just going back to put the fishing line out to see if it helps. Why not? I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with that. We can all unsubscribe if we have to.
I think worst case scenario, it gets deleted is usually,
Yeah,
how
exactly.
I feel, but I'm not a foundation, so that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Well, I hope that I would urge any of my colleagues in our field, like we're receiving the fruits of a lot of hard work that you all put out. And even if we can't fund it or can't really give it the attention it deserves, I hope we just quietly delete or reply, thank you, and move on, as opposed to berating people for sending us stuff. I think
Right.
you need to be sending us stuff. It's fine.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, Vina?
Hi. My second question was, if you have an organization where you are really benefiting visually impaired or blind in another country, but the organization is based in US and they are helping those individuals because they come from like poor countries and they don't have money or assets or the funds to really get engaged in other program. But if you are helping them, are there any foundation that can fund you for those kind of program? Because I did a lot of research and I didn't find many which would be US based and can help a US based organization, but helping people in another country.
Mm-hmm. I think that foundations can fund US-based charities. So if you are based in the US, registered here as a nonprofit organization,
right?
People can fund your work wherever you're having that work take place. I think the challenge is it's finding the donors who, in addition to funding domestic organizations and domestic US-based work, want to fund that same work overseas. And you obviously can make an amazing case for the need overseas. I mean, clearly that is without doubt. So I think it just depends on, I think it's just a matter of finding those funders. Again, going to the database we just talked about and maybe searching, who funds internationally. And then I don't know, excuse me, it's been a while since I used that database. I'm sure it's improved from when I first did it, but you could probably do a couple of keywords, visual impairment and international, or the region of the world you're funding, or the particular country, and you might find people. This all, of course, is all about finding the foundations. This doesn't even begin to address finding the folks who hold donor advised funds, which is a foundation just held differently, right? But and very, very, very hard to find. So some of that might also be existing donors, asking existing donors, are there people that you think we should be talking to? If you've already got some folks supporting what you do, who else do they know? And getting that connections out to find the right people who might have a lead to a foundation that would do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to find the donors because they understand the cause and they know that we collaborate with a lot of other organizations, but it's the foundation that we've been having challenge to find who would fund, the cause.
Yeah, and I will say that, and then you all know this, right? But the foundations are just people. I mean, the foundation at its core is just an individual donor or an individual donor's family that did really well and had the have the need to set up an actual structure for their giving as opposed to just using their own checkbook. So if you're talking to individuals and you've got donors working with you to support your work, at some point, probably somebody is going to either know someone working inside of a foundation or be someone who has a foundation or a donor advised fund. So I think some of the same communications tricks or tips that we've been talking about apply there as well. Making information really digestible, making it really easy for them to get a quick update, making it easy for them to have your work at the top of their mind because they hear from you every 8 to 12 weeks about these great advances or a problem, something you're struggling to solve. I think asking your supporters, big and large and small, we're really trying to figure this one thing out. Does anybody have thoughts? I'd love to have a conversation. So somebody, I think in fundraising, individual donor fundraising, individual high dollar fundraising, you talk about asking for advice, not money, right? Because you ask for advice and people then give you advice, they become invested in what you're doing, they become excited by what you're doing, and then they give you money. So you could do it that way as well.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Oh, just what are some other webinars or virtual conferences you would recommend related to nonprofits or private foundations?
So you're based in Wisconsin or going to school there or both?
No, I'm based in Wisconsin, but I'd like to think our nonprofit is everywhere.
Yeah,
But it's very, very new.
Okay, so I think that lot of states, most states have a nonprofit center. In Massachusetts, we have the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network. We have this group, the Nonprofit Net. We have Philanthropy Massachusetts, which is both funders and nonprofits. You probably have something similar in Wisconsin for the entire state, and either for donors who work together and learn together, or for nonprofits who work together and learn together, or maybe a combination like we have here in Massachusetts. So I think looking at your statewide landscape, look at a community foundation. I don't know what city or state or town you're in Wisconsin, but you probably have a community foundation that covers some of your area. They offer a lot of them. The Boston Foundation certainly offers a lot of online webinars for educating people about issues. Maybe there's a Green Bay or Milwaukee or whatever city community foundation that offers some of that as well. And as you start to get on some of those emailing lists for information, you will get lots of notices about, hey, come to our webinar, come to our session, sign up here. A lot of it's free, not all of it is, but a lot of it is free. So that's how I would suggest starting.
From your experience, is the Boston community foundation the most interactive and offers the most?
So I don't know many others, right? I've lived here for 25 years, so this is the one I know. They do a lot of education programs. They used to do everything in person, obviously, and now a lot of it's on Zoom. But they open the doors for funders and nonprofits to come together to hear speakers from, State Department of Education or State Department of Housing and Urban Affairs or the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban. So they do a lot. I don't know that everybody does that, but I'm guessing that one of the communities in Wisconsin with the Community Foundation will have an active foundation in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Sure.
Now it's like,
Dennis, do you see anybody else who's got any questions? And then comments, I'm not looking.
I don't. I'll double, pardon me, I'm double
I do see one. I do
Chat.
see one in the chat. Yeah, from Melanie. Thanks.
Okay.
Let's say we get turned down / deleted during a foundation's application cycle. We don't advance to the next round. Do we come back to the next cycle with a tweaked original application or highlight a different program within the guidelines? That's a great question. I think I sound like a broken record. It depends. It depends on if you can figure out why you didn't advance. And I hope that program officers and staff at foundations are willing to have that conversation. If you've been invited in to make an application, and you put the time and effort into it and you get a no, it's really, I think it's incumbent on us to at least explain the no. We had too many requests, and yours sadly was not one of the, we had 100 requests, we funded 20, yours was not one of the 20, we're really sorry about that. Or we said in our guidelines we were funding this, that, the other, your work seemed to fall outside of that, so sorry, we can't fund you. Well, that's a very helpful piece of information that then you can then say, oh, I misread the guidelines, or oh, they misread what I wrote, and I'm going to try again. I don't think it ever hurts to try again, and I don't think it hurts at all to try, maybe more than once if you have to. Is there any feedback somebody can give you? Because it's not fair to ask you to keep reapplying if you don't have any guidance. Now, the caveat I'll make to that is if you threw out a letter of inquiry or a proposal that was uninvited, I don't think that you're owed much of any explanation. It's just, it's a number, it becomes a numbers game. There's so many people seeking funding and there's relatively fewer dollars to go around. But if they invited you in, I hope they would give you feedback for that. I hope that's helpful. Andrea, I see you have your hand up.
I did. Hey, Mary, so I apologize. I'm not on video. My Wi-Fi has been so poor the last 2 hours, so I'm off, but it's good to see you. I have a question. I fear it's going to be a little broad, so I'll try to tell it, but you're bringing such a wealth of background and evaluation of ventures. I'm wondering, what's your view, or maybe what's your recommendations for organizations that are a little bit younger? You know, because I think you said so well in the opening, like how to craft the narrative. And I think when you're kind of thinking prospectively, as well as some of the things you've done, what might be your advice? Or do you feel like foundations really, you know, respond to ones that have got a track record?
Yeah, that's such a, what's the phrase, right? The catch-22. You can't raise the money until you have the experience, and you can't get the experience without raising the money to do the work, to build your portfolio, your track record, right? So yeah, that's a challenge. I guess for a new organization, I mean, I meant to look this up before the call, and I'm sorry I did not, but the percentage of funds that come for nonprofits that come from a foundation, isn't it like 10%? Maybe it's 12. Yeah. It's not a lot. So the vast majority of funds for nonprofit work come from individuals, small, large dollar, but individuals. And then the actual foundations that are formalized approaches and application processes is a much smaller part of a revenue of the pool of people who give. Now, obviously, if you're giving $100,000, it can be a much bigger part of your budget, but it's they're not usually the first funders into anything. I think philanthropists would like, organized foundations, not just philanthropists, organized foundations would like to, some of them think of themselves as risk takers and, you know, willing to take smart bets on new entities. A lot of them want to see some evidence of some traction. You're around for a year or two. You've got the first class going with the kids that you work with in the arts program. You've got the first workforce development program for young people leaving the juvenile justice system. And once you've done that first one and you can say, this is how well we did, and this is how many we reached, but we reached 10 kids out of 100,000 or 10,000 or whatever, we need more. I think then you've got something, then you've got a better case to make. I just think it's really hard unless you know somebody at the foundation to start out with them. But again, if you have 10 donors and maybe everybody gives you $1,000 to get you started, and then one of those $1,000 donors or $100 donors is going to know somebody else. And once you get some body of support up and some body of work behind you, and I don't think there's a formula, it's not 6 months, it's not 6 years. I think then you can really start to put yourself out there to go after foundations. We got an inquiry, case in point, we got an email across the transom last year to the trustee of a foundation, and they looked at the email and they said, this sounds interesting, let's give them a small grant to start. This is a brand new venture by a guy who's just graduating college to do a really incredibly ambitious project. He came back this year and he's like some massive award winner. He's been recognized by everybody. He's expanded his work tenfold in a year. And so it was a really great bet to place, and the funder decided to go ahead and renew the funding. That is not usually how that happens, but this person is a superstar and is getting a lot of funding from others as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea where we are in time. Like, there's a limit to what I can track. So I'm sorry, I don't even know if
Okay.
we've got any time left or not.
Mary, we have about 5 minutes. Make that 4 minutes for you and 1 for me.
Okay. Anything else that I can share? And I'm happy to have like my little short deck shared if it's useful. I just did succinct and small. Howard's nodding. I'll happily send it to you, or Dennis can send it. Absolutely. And I had offered, and I'm happy. I cannot be overrun right now. But if you've got a particular question about how do I tweak this or remind me of this, I'll happily try to address it. My email is on the first slide of the deck, and I will do my best. And maybe that's my 4 minutes is maybe need cut short, Dennis, and maybe it goes to you. Oh, wait, let me check chat one more time. And nope, lots of thanks. Thank you all. So no, I think we're good.
Okay, well, for those of you who were not aware, Mary's presentation had to be rescheduled from last spring.
All right.
So it's been quite a while, a long time coming, and absolutely worth the wait. Mary, this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
I'm glad it was useful. Thank you.
Oh, more than that. And that's my feedback. Everyone's feedback on today's program is very important to us. So we're going to email you, excuse me, our satisfaction survey link. And also, please remember Nonprofit Net this holiday season. Over 200 organizations have benefited from our Zoominars this year. And the way we can keep them open to everyone without charge is with your financial support. So please consider donating $10, $20, or even more. We'll be emailing contact information for your donations along with the satisfaction survey and the slides, which Mary just offered to you all. Now, looking forward to our next program. If we've learned one thing from the COVID pandemic, it's that change can happen at any time. February speaker, Siobhan O'Riordan, says that the only constant in our lives is, in fact, change. So she's going to help us learn how to manage change for our organizations. And that's Tuesday, February 15th from 1 to 2 p.m. We wish you a happy holiday season, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you.